Hello, bruvs. We're back with Napoleon, bisexual emperor, with no evidence of bisexuality. Not that I'm looking for it, but that was the reason why I picked it up, because it was an interesting title, especially for the early 1970s. I don't know what the hell the point of this book is at this point, but Chapter 6, Sweethearts and Wives. Sweethearts and wives, and may they never meet, runs the nautical toast. Such funny guys, those seafarers. In this chapter, I am thinking of the women Napoleon married, those he might have married, and some to whom the term mistress could not be applied. Sad though it may be to use that term to describe Marie Waluska, one of the nicest girls in the story. The facts of the case unavoidably consign her to the chapter on mistresses. Let us begin near the end of Napoleon's life, when the sordid St. Helena scene is brightened by a friendship between the corpulent captive and a girl of 15, Betsy Balcombe, who contributed to the Idol by writing a book when she had grown up and become Mrs. Abel. Just how idyllic it really was must be a matter of opinion. Whilst Longwood House was being prepared for Napoleon's occupation, he lived in the pavilion at Betsy's home, the Briars, in which Wellington had made a brief stay only 10 years before, whilst on his way home from India. Napoleon clearly enjoyed the proximity to the home of a happy family. He had shaken off much of the physical and nervous exhaustion of the months before and after his defeat. He had indeed begun to do so under the relaxing influence of life on board ship, amongst British soldiers for whom he had a genuine admiration, and who, especially in Bellerophon, treated their prisoner with such unexpected kindly sensitivity. But he could hardly have fallen in love with this pert, vivacious, and completely natural child. He seems to have been fascinated by her naturalness and refusal to be overawed by the great Boney. How could this comfortable, paunchy, elderly gentleman in a Panama hat be the Corsican ogre so dreaded by the grown-ups? She was easy prey. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. As I was saying, she was easy prey for the smile which had captivated so many victims. Napoleon himself had never been in greater need of sympathy and affection, and he was ready to accept it from this child. Oh my God. After all, who else was there? Yeah. Yes. Napoleon. Pedophile. I cannot regard Betsy's friendship with Boney, and the teasing which he seemed to enjoy, as flirtatious, though some have thought it so, nor need we suspect that weakness for little girls which made trouble hitherto normal men in later life. I mean, in I guess defense of Napoleon in early 1800s, men were marrying like 12-year-olds. So I mean, no need we suspect that weakness for little girls which may trouble hitherto normal men in later life. Napoleon watched Betsy grow from a high-spirited schoolgirl into a sensible, sympathetic young woman, and it was on the whole an idyllic friendship. An occasional bout of mischievousness on Betsy's part brought out Napoleon's malicious streak, and a touch of jealousy was perceptible when she flirted with other men, but his love of children and a strong feeling for a happy family circle are seen in a kindlier light at the Briars than at any other time in his life. Yeah, he's a prisoner, fuckface. Sad to say, he had to maw the idyll for a time. The teasing of an adult by a child is one thing, but a really kind-hearted adult will not allow his side of the teasing to become cruel, as did Napoleon, where he hid Betsy's first party dress and allowed his small friend to cry herself to sleep. Napoleon, speaking of his flirtation with Caroline Colombet when he was 17 years old, asked, "Will it be believed our sole delight on that occasion was in nibbling cherries together?" Yes, indeed, it will be believed by anyone who accepts my analysis of his character. At this period of his life, he was writing of love as a sinister passion, harmful to society and to private happiness. So we need not be at all surprised that he was not prepared to go any further with Caroline Colombier than nibbling cherries at that certain other little flirtations, which have been hinted at with Madame Naudlin, Marie Masseret, Manesca Play, and various unnamed girls, all came to nothing. In St. Helena, I thought he was impotent anyway. In St. Helena, Napoleon himself told General Gourgaud that as a young officer he had no time for chasing girls, as he had too many fish to fry. Both Frederick Masson and Gertrude Aretz rather cynically conclude that he had nothing much to do with girls at this time because he was too poor. Napoleon's poverty, allied to his ambitiousness, has led many writers to believe that his conduct in Paris, there it is again, Paris, during those months before he married Josephine, conduct which he himself said was really a search for ready-made love and reassurance, was nothing but a frantic hunt for a rich wife. The same motive has been thought to account for his proposal of marriage to the girl whom he used to say had been his first love, Desiree Clary, the sister of his brother Joseph's wife. After all, there was just enough Clary money for two penniless Bonapartes to share, and the marriage would have been a most suitable one. Napoleon's mother, who saw his ghost upon his death, favored Desiree as a daughter-in-law. Desiree's father said that one Bonaparte in the family was enough, but after his death, the Clary family were favorably disposed towards the engagement. Many different views have been expressed about this friendship or love affair, whichever it was, and about the personality of Desiree, from whose marriage with Marshal Bernadotte, the Swedish royal family, are descended. I have mentioned in the previous chapter the coarse and unchivalrous way in which Napoleon spoke of this first love when in St. Helena. He had degenerated into a crashing bore, convinced that himself and his alleged love affairs were the only topics of interest to anyone. He claimed that it was because he had seduced her that he had made her husband a marshal, a prince, and a king. It is true that Napoleon helped and favored Bernadotte because of his affection for Desiree, but it was the Swedes, not Napoleon, who made him a prince and a king, and Napoleon probably made this remark partly in order to hurt Bernadotte, for whom he had long felt a jealous hatred. Although Desiree, even after her marriage to Bernadotte, something tells me it's Bernadotte, I'm going to say Bernadotte, Bernadotte would never come to court because of her understandable dislike of Josephine. Napoleon used to shower gifts upon her. Masson believed that he never ceased to be activated by the desire to atone for the sorrow and mortification he had caused her. Some Bonapartists have chosen to depict her as a rather heartless woman, unmoved by her former lover's misfortunes, though she had been willing to accept his patronage. After Bernadotte had become crowned Prince of Sweden, and even after he was king, she often stayed in Paris, and she was there even when Bernadotte had assumed command of the alleged forces opposed to Napoleon. She had been accused of being in league with Fouche and Talleyrand against Napoleon, and it was said that she was able to act as an agent for Napoleon's enemies because of his old love for her. He certainly used a gentle diplomacy, very unlike his usual methods, in dealing with enemies, when he suggested that the continued presence in Paris of the wife of a declared enemy was inappropriate. Desiree was never truly happy in her husband's adopted country. And it may be true that her frequent visits to Paris were prompted by a love of the city and its shops. She has never been accused of actually trying to cadge favors from Napoleon, though she did retain possession of a mansion which he had bought for Bernadotte, although its demolition was essential to the construction of the present boulevard. Houseman Napoleon III was tactful enough to postpone this until after her death. In assessing the character of Desiree after she was jilted by Napoleon, I think her reputation can stand or fall on what one thinks of her letter to Napoleon when she heard of his marriage. I cannot believe that this letter from a girl of 18 was anything but genuine. You have made me so unhappy, and I am weak enough to forgive you. You married. Poor Desiree must no longer love you or think of you. My one consolation is that you will know how steadfast I am. I have nothing more to hope for but death. Life is a torment to me, since I may no longer dedicate it to you. You, married. I cannot grasp the thought. It kills me. Never shall I belong to another, and I had so hoped soon to be the happiest of women. Your wife. Your marriage has shattered my happiness. All the same, I wish you the greatest joy and blessing in your marriage. May the women you have chosen make you as happy as I had intended to make you, and as happy as you deserve to be. In the midst of your present happiness, do not quite forget poor Eugenie, and be sorry for her fate. Is quoted by Napoleon and his women friends by Gertrude Aretz, translated by E. and C. Paul, 1927. This is believed to have shaken Napoleon. I do not believe what he left her in the lurch because he hoped to find a richer wife. That would have been unpardonable. I think that he deserves our sympathy, for he was probably throwing away his last chance of marrying a woman who would have loved him forever. When he met Marie Waluska, it was too late. He never forgot his first love. The mare which he rode in the advance to Quatre Bras was called Desiree, and she brought him no better luck than he deserved. It would be stretching a point to use the term sweetheart for any of the women to whom Napoleon proposed marriage after leaving Desiree, and before Mary and Josephine, even with the only young one among them, the attractive Grace Dalrymple. His relationship seems to have been mostly on an intellectual plane. They had many interesting conversations. One day in the garden of the Tuileries, when some children had been identified to Napoleon as English, he exclaimed with bitterness, "English! I wish the earth would open and swallow them up." When he said that, to speak thus in her presence was not very gallant. He replied that she was Scottish, and he did not consider her to be English. She rejoined, "I am prouder of being an Englishwoman than of anything." Scottish nationalists would presumably deplore her answer, but perhaps they can take heart from knowing that he at least recognized the difference, and may have preferred the Scots to the complacent English. Sexually immature young men who, like the young Bonaparte, feel the need for reassurance may seek experience with prostitutes. Whoa. Hey, I don't feel so self-assured. I'm going to go fuck a whore. That's great logic, bro. They may also not seek the experience with prostitutes, bruv. This course cannot be recommended if undertaken in an experimental spirit, for any failure in such sex without love could have discouraging effects on the seeker's morale. The hazards of marriage to a prostitute are such that one can feel considerable respect for Josephine, that her marriage to Napoleon was as successful as it was. Prostitute may seem a harsh word to apply to the charming, elegant, good-natured, and warm-hearted Josephine, but when it was used by General Harsh, he knew what he was talking about. He had had an affair with Josephine when they were both in the Combs prison during the Terror. When she tried to revive it when they were both free, he broke it off with these words: "Such an amour can be pardoned in a prison, but hardly outside. One may take a prostitute for a mistress, but hardly for a wife." My God. It is hard to blame Josephine for seeking consolation and protection in that grim prison, in daily expectation of a cruel death. Her husband, before his execution, had formed a most amorous friendship with a fellow prisoner, Madame de Custine, and after Beauharnais was executed, Josephine did not long remain inconsolable. Lazare Hoche, tall, gallant, ruggedly handsome, and a military of the Republic, even if in temporary eclipse, was a comfort when few women in her terrible situation could have resisted. But Hoche's cruel epithet was justified by her conduct when she was hunting for a protector in Paris. Long ago her husband, Alexander de Beauharnais had repudiated the paternity of her daughter Hortense. In a letter brimming over with abuse of this wife, whom he called the vilest of creatures, this violent estrangement followed a visit which he paid to her native island of Martinique, where he heard a lot of malicious gossip about her conduct there. Much confusing doubt and rumor surround Josephine's early life in Martinique. She had what may have been quite a serious childhood romance with a boy, usually referred to simply as William of Martinique, the descendant of a Scottish Jacobite emigrant. Her aunt, who was living openly with the Marquis de Beauharnais, broke up this love affair because she was determined that her niece should marry Alexander de Beauharnais, to whom a younger sister, who had died, had been engaged. Josephine, aged 16, duly married Alexander, who was 19 years old, but the marriage did not go smoothly. It ended in a legal separation after a little more than 5 years. But some 3 years before that, Alexander had deserted his wife, and they never again lived together. Before the legal separation, Alexander abducted his 3-year-old son, but had to give him up. He had been charged in an affair of his own with an old flame, Madame de Longpre, and as she accompanied him to Martinique, it may have been she who fed her lover with malicious gossip about his wife, all wives. Possibly Josephine's love for William of Martinique did not end with her marriage. She returned to Martinique, taking her daughter, Hortense. Is that a period? Yeah, that's a fucking period. She returned to Martinique, taking her daughter Hortense in 1788, in circumstances which are clouded in doubt. It has been alleged that she was pregnant at the time and not by her husband. A possible abortion on board ship has been suggested as the cause of her subsequent childlessness. She stayed in Martinique for nearly 3 years, which rather understandably strengthened her husband's suspicions that she was still in love with William. But Beauharnais did eventually apologize for his cruel accusations and try to patch up their marriage. He certainly did assume parental responsibility for Hortense. Whatever may have been the truth about her life in Martinique and her husband's jealous suspicions, much of the evidence about her immoral conduct has been accepted by historians, and not only by hostile ones such as Joseph Turquan, but by the eminently fair-minded, ardently Bonapartist Frederick Masson. It seems certain that she threw respectability to the winds in the feverish atmosphere of post-revolutionary Paris, and went to bed impartially with important men in the regime, such as Barras and Hoche, and with lesser beings, an aide-de-camp and Hoche's Alsatian groom von Acker. Count Horace de Ville-Castel claimed that his father, who was Josephine's chambermaid, had been her lover before she married Napoleon. Whores, all of them, I suspect. Josephine did not possess the considerable fortune for which Bonaparte hoped, but she did not lack experience, obviously. She thought that he had money, and her letters make it plain that she thought he would be a useful protector. She made some sort of advances to him. There in that romantic story of her sending her boy Eugene to see the general and asked for the return of his dead father's sword. If this really occurred, it was a shrewd move, for Napoleon was fond of children, and is said to have been greatly moved by the forthright, fearless lad who was to become his loyal and affectionate stepson. But for the most part, once his mind was made up, it was the general who made the running. He besieged the bewildered society, Butterfly leaning across other guests at table, to engage her in ardent conversation, or rather to submerge her in torrents of Corsican eloquence. The best she could produce in return was somewhat apprehensive amusement. Il est drôle, Bonaparte, was her almost unvarying comment, and she certainly did not love her strange suitor, and even admitted to feeling disagreeably indifferent to him. When Grace Dalrymple asked her how she could have accepted him, she admitted that she had no affection for him, but hoped he might be of service to her children. Josephine was some 7 years older than Napoleon, but he added 2 years to his 26. and she took off 5 so that both could declare the same age, 28. It was a civil marriage, a fact of which Josephine took advantage some 8 years later, when she was striving to keep her husband, knowing that the Pope would not attend the coronation unless her position was regularized. She revealed the facts to him, and Napoleon had to submit to a private religious wedding performed by a step-uncle, who had by then become Cardinal Fesch. Before her marriage to Napoleon, Josephine, who was christened Marie Joseph Rose de Tascher de la Pagerie, had always been known as Rose, or by her family nickname of Yeyette. When he married her, Napoleon decided that she would in future be known as Josephine. Perhaps he wanted to set the seal of his possession upon her. Or maybe it was his organ inferiority. And to make it clear that she was now entering upon a new life, it may have been his strong family feeling which led him to choose the part of her name which was a feminine form of the name of the elder brother Joseph. It would not have been out of character if he had been thinking so far ahead as to realize how impossible would be Imperatrice Rose, or even worse, Lorraine Rose. Napoleon overheard Josephine's notary, Monsieur Raguideau, the Empress Josephine, the Empress Marie-Louise. Both kind of squirrely looking, honestly. She looks like she's 45. She looks like she just got out of the beehive. Betsy Battlecombe, Mademoiselle George, the whale. Jesus Christ. Begging her not to marry him, saying that he had nothing but a cloak and a sword. Impressed by this care for her client's interest, Bonaparte shook his hand and said he hoped he would continue to be in charge of their affairs. At the time of the coronation, he could not resist sending for Monsieur Raguideau to ask, "Well, have I nothing but a cloak and a sword now?" 2 days after the marriage, he was off to the wars, and she could hope that she might see no more of him. Immediately, his astonishing flood of letters began to arrive, most of them beginning "Ma bonne amie," though there is at least one with the odd beginning "My peerless little mother," "Mon incomparable petite mère," and not at a time when she was trying to deceive him into believing that she was pregnant. A curious, unreal quality about them has led writers such as Turkhan and Hilaire Belloc to compare them to letters such as lovers write in novels. Mr. Belloc must have read an expurgated edition, for the originals are in many cases much too hot for cold print in an English novel of his day. But in the early stages of the marriage, Josephine did not return either his affection or his passionate love letters. Frederick Masson saw these letters as a constant cry from a hungry art, from a man who had lived chastely, to the mistress older, more worldly, more sophisticated than himself, who satisfied her heart and senses and her vagina, if we believe the stories about Martinique. But to Josephine, la maîtresse agit mondaine et experte, they were merely strange, odd, droll, like the writer C. Dreux de Bonaparte. She shared them with Claire de Remusat, who was struck by their extraordinary quality and realized that Napoleon's passion made her frivolous friend almost the mainspring of the victorious march of the Revolutionary Army. The French would soon be called Josephine Our Lady of Victory. But all she learned from Napoleon was how to write letters to her lover, Hippolyte Charles, with whom she had begun a passionate liaison. It was to him that she was sending 1,000 kisses as far as my heart, when she could muster only tepid, indifferent, and infrequent acknowledgments of similar outpourings of her husband's art. She hoped to leave Napoleon and marry Charles, and although Napoleon was able to break up the affair, it began again when he was in Egypt. According to Barras, she was delighted when rumors reached France that Napoleon had been murdered in Egypt. When Barras had sent everyone out of the room, she begged to be told if it were true. And when he said that he believed it was, she made no attempt to conceal her joy. "Ah, I breathe freely. Ah, I breathe freely. Ah, my friend, if it be a fact, I shall no longer be so wretched. He is a man who has never loved anyone but himself. He is the most ingrained and ferocious egotist the earth has ever seen. He has never known anything but his own interest, his ambition. She rambled on, and after further reassurance that he was dead, she said, "Ah, one wicked man the less," and went on blackening her husband's character. I mean, in Napoleon's defense, he was at war and she was literally a whore. But, I mean, there you go. Maybe he was whoring during the war, and I don't know, but I'm going to stop here because it's my day off and I'm not reading all day to people on the internet. Goodbye, bravs. Goodbye.